Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Juan Fregoso. I'm the Director of Homelessness and Housing for Councilwoman Park. Thank you all for joining us today. This is one of our many meetings we've held over the year to discuss just several pressing issues that come up when it comes to homelessness. Today, we will be going a little more in depth on some of the vehicle dwelling concerns. We've definitely heard from a lot in the community and know just the impact that we've had when it comes to RVs, as well as vehicles that are used as dwellings, which is people living out of them. As well, we will be covering our oversized vehicle regulations. Thank you all again for joining. The purpose of our meeting today is to kind of get everybody a better understanding of the vehicle dwelling operations that the city, our office, and our different partners have to go through. So we want to make sure that everyone gets a better understanding on what the basis for towing a vehicle is, especially a vehicle deemed as a dwelling. We'll also be going over some of the challenges to addressing when it comes to vehicle dwellings. On the agenda today, just a brief overview of some of the things we'll be covering. We'll have some brief introductions. Again, my name is Juan Fregoso. I'm the Director of Homelessness and Housing. We as a team have just expanded ourselves. We now have my colleague, Ashley Lozada, who is our Homelessness and Housing Coordinator. She was our Venice Field Deputy and is now coming under kind of the homelessness wing of the Councilwoman's team for us to be, again, better focused on the day-to-day issues when it comes to homelessness. And we also have Miss Carol Williams, who is our unhoused liaison and helps me and the team work more directly with our outreach teams, as well as our people who are experiencing homelessness out on the streets. When we need someone to go out and make direct contact, Miss Carol is either going out there with our teams, as well as myself, and or with the homelessness, with the LASA crews. We'll introduce our city departments. It takes a lot of us within the city to kind of effectuate some of these cleanups and enforcement that has to take place sometimes. So we'll introduce you to some of those departments that are all the departments that are involved in that. We will go over the oversized vehicle ordinance. Again, we'll discuss the vehicle dwelling operations, and then we'll go into some questions and answers. With that, Councilwoman, I will hand it over to you for a few remarks before we introduce our teams.
Okay, fantastic. Juan, thank you so much, and good night, everyone. It is great to have so many of you with us this evening. And before I get started with my remarks, I wanted to acknowledge some of our city's dedicated partners who are here with us today. Captain Tavani Price from DOT, Captain Applegate from LAPD, our CAO's champion for the homeless, Sophia Peralta, and we also have Veronica De La Cruz with us this evening from the City Attorney's Office. Their collaboration and partnership with me and your CD11 team have enabled us to address homelessness across the district with the urgency that is warranted under these circumstances. Tonight, we are here to address a very specific, critical issue that affects all of us. And that is the 73% increase that we have seen in vehicle dwelling on the West Side. That number is more than a statistic. It is a call to action for all of us. My team and I are working on this diligently, not just to secure the outreach and the housing that is necessary, but to confront this challenge head on. Tonight, my team and I and our city partners are here to hear from you, to address your concerns, and I want to get through as many questions as we can. I also want to talk tonight about the initiatives that we're working on, some of the challenges that we're facing, and the things that we are doing as a council office to ensure that we have safer, cleaner neighborhoods for everyone. Before, though, we move to the issue of RVs, I want to take a moment and set the stage for what we've done so far, where we are now, and where we're headed next. So please remember, when I took office earlier this year, there were large-scale tent encampments and RV encampments literally all over the district. And we immediately moved to begin addressing the tent encampments first. And we have strategically and methodically and compassionately worked on moving those folks in the tent encampments into interim housing and shutting those encampments down. Through 4 different inside safe operations in partnership with the mayor, we cleared the massive tent encampments at the Venice Bridge Home, Ozone and Ocean Front Walk, the Culver Median, and most recently in partnership with Inside Safe, Council District 5, Culver City, and others, we finally were able to address the decades-old encampment at Venice and the 405. As a council office in partnership with LASA and other nonprofits, we have led multiple encampment operation interventions, including Venice and Dell, Exposition, Lincoln and Rose, and Jefferson. Jefferson is by far the largest RV operation that we have done in CD11, and we learned a lot from it. There were many, many months of planning that went into that, a lot of work with outreach and our community partners to secure the resources that we needed to do that. And frankly, we have now created a template to do more of these operations in CD11 as well as all over the city. For me personally, and I know for many of you who care about the Ballona wetlands, the opportunity to restore this incredible environmental asset and return it to the community is something that I am extremely proud of our ability to accomplish as quickly as we have. Thanks to these combined efforts, we have now moved hundreds of people off of the streets and into interim housing, and we have one of the highest retention rates, and we also have the highest rate of successfully moving people from interim housing into permanent housing. I also want to address the scale of these operations. These take many, many months of planning and collaboration to secure the necessary resources. In fact, on some of our large operations, and Juan can speak to this, there may be as many as 100 people or more in a Zoom planning meeting. I also think it's important that, what you see on the ground during the operation, all of the city departments who are out there, all of the other jurisdictional partners that we work with to complete these, that's only part of what goes into it. And those operations can take multiple days. And then also keep in mind that there is the entire back-end operation and infrastructure. Now we've got these folks off the streets in interim housing, and we have an entire operation intended to get them connected to services and stabilized and ready to move into permanent housing. So we do all of that work in the context of a massive citywide staffing shortage, a lack of adequate beds and resources, and a problem that is now at a scale and magnitude that should have never been allowed to get to this point in the first place. We have now, as a council office and a council district, successfully addressed most of the large tent encampments. And while that work will continue, we need to get to the largest crisis facing the district, and that is the RVs and the vehicle dwelling. LASA estimates that there are about 14,000 people citywide living in vehicles. We are all very concerned about the very real public health and safety issues that those create. So I want to go over a few of the things that we are working on to address these issues. I recently met with Supervisor Horvath and asked for her partnership to combine city and county resources. The county has been a partner in many of our operations so far, and we're very grateful for that. I have also requested to the supervisor that LASA provide the neighborhood-specific homelessness numbers that we need so that we can make good policy and start investing in the right kinds of interventions. My team has also been extremely actively engaged with the local community around this. We regularly meet with our neighborhood councils, various homelessness committees, neighborhood working groups, as well as our nonprofit and agency partners to successfully move these operations and identify the policy changes that are necessary. You may also recall that in recent months, I introduced a motion that would crack down on landlords, the practice of leasing out unsafe, unsanitary, inoperable vehicles that couldn't possibly pass environmental inspection standards. That was unanimously passed by council, and we are waiting on an ordinance back from the city attorney's office. I also currently have a motion pending that would regulate where these vehicles can and can't park. I think it's really important that we have some safe barriers around our sensitive use sites, like our homes, parks, daycares, and libraries. But the reality is we are going to have to make some space somewhere to absorb some of this while we work on the long-term interventions and solutions that are going to be necessary. Through the city budget this year, we have funded homelessness interventions related to vehicular dwelling. The mayor's task force is working on a set of citywide protocols, and the CD11, our director, Juan Fregoso, is participating in that task force. So as those protocols come to fruition, as my motions make their way through the legislative process, and we get the legal tools that we need to help start addressing this, I am hopeful that we will continue to see the momentum and the progress that we've already demonstrated when it comes to unsheltered homeless intent encampments. Our strategy going forward is to shift focus and resources to the vehicular dwelling. And I just want everyone to know that this is an issue I am well aware of. I see this with my own eyes, what's happening in our district, and I appreciate all of you that have reached out, shared ideas, expressed concerns, and worked with me and my team to identify next steps and strategies to move us forward as a community and as a council district and as a city as a whole. So with that, I will go ahead and kick this over to our district director, Gabby Medina, who's going to talk a little bit about oversized vehicle regulation.
Thank you,
Gabby,
Councilwoman.
Hold it.
Move that around just a slight
Okay.
smidget. Sorry. And just one point of clarification. I think at the beginning you mentioned there was an increase of 73% of RVs. There was a 73% increase in homelessness in our district, roughly just over a 10% increase in vehicle dwellings on the last count. So
thank you for the clarification on that. Yes, but I just want to make the point to our constituents in this call. We are not imagining what we are seeing on the ground. The data demonstrates that this experience that we are all living amongst is very, very real.
thank you, Councilwoman. And before I hand it over to Gabby, I do want to introduce our departments real quick and give them a minute or two to briefly introduce themselves and kind of explain what their role in part of this process is. And I will go deeper into it as we go, but I do want to allow our departments to introduce themselves before we go into some of these conversations, so you can see some of the local faces with your departments that are helping our office collaborate on a lot of the issues you call us and email us about. With that, with our Department of Transportation, I'll start with you, Captain Price. You can say a few words and introduce yourself. Hold on. There you go.
Thank you, Juan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Captain Tamani Price, and I'm currently over the Western Park and Enforcement Area Office, responsible for part of CD11. And we do play a role. We work with other city departments in regards to the homeless encampment situation. So pretty much our role is we go out and assess the current RVs that are at the locations, either, you know, our supervisor or an officer or myself, we go out and assess. We see what violations that we could possibly cite and or impound immediately on site. If anything is in violation at that point, we'll go ahead and assess. And if there's nothing that we can't immediately site or impound for, then we start the 72-hour process, which is usually, well, first we make sure that the RV is not stolen. We run it for stolen plates, make sure it's not stolen. If it's not stolen, then we go ahead and mark the vehicle up for approximately 72 hours. And what that process is to make sure that the vehicle, quote unquote, doesn't move within 72 continuous hours. So we would mark the vehicle. We have several ways of marking vehicles, not necessarily just chalk. We do have several ways. And then we will return back to the same location, and technically it's 73 hours, but we are short-staffed, but we try and get to there as soon as possible. If the vehicle has not moved at that point, then we issue it a citation for not being, there's no movement within 72 hours. Once we issue the cite, then we coordinate with the CD11 office as well as the other city departments and start the process of how we're going to remove the vehicle from the city streets, as well as provide homeless services to the citizens that are in the vehicles at that time. And that's usually not an overnight process. The whole process to coordinate other departments and myself usually takes a couple of weeks or so. We do continue to go back out to the location to make sure that the status of the vehicle or the RV hasn't changed from the time of sight to the time that we actually go out and conduct an operation. And if not, then we proceed to coordinate with the local official police garage and see if we can get a heavy duty tow out there. Again, these are oversized vehicles, so we cannot just call the local official police garage and request a regular tow. So that intel takes additional time to make sure they have the space and or the resources to come and coordinate and impound the vehicle as well. But we're usually in coordination with the CD11 as well as the other city departments to make sure that it's available to impound, whether that's immediately or come back. There is steps that's involved in that. So, I apologize if it looks like that it's a timely process, but it is, but that's pretty much the gist of how we are going about moving the RVs off the streets.
Thank you, Captain. And I will go a little bit more in detail in terms of kind of the process overall. With that, I will, and I see some hands are up, just so everybody, we want to get kind of through this, and then we will take everybody's questions as we, after we do some introductions and go through the, go through our presentation. So we see the hands, but just quick point of order for the agenda earlier. So next I have Captain Applegate and our LAPD team. You guys came deep today, so I'll hand it over to you, Captain.
All right, good evening, everybody. Mike Applegate, LAPD Pacific Station. I'm one of the two captains here at the station, and I will give a quick introduction to some of the other folks here in the room with me. We'll start with Sergeant Brian Cook. He oversees our community relations office here. I guess Sergeant Jeff Lubbock, he oversees our senior lead officers. And then we have two of our senior lead officers known to many of you, Senior Lead Officer Contreras over in the Venice area. And then new to the senior lead office is Officer Sam Gill. And he is kind of on the eastern side of Venice, but a welcome addition to the team here in the senior lead office. So, and then in addition, I think we may also have one or two other senior lead officers who are in the audience also as well tonight. A quick introduction in terms of our role in the vehicle dwelling. For the police department, this is very much a collaborative process. We join forces with a lot of other city departments to try to do our part in tackling this issue. And as already mentioned, this is one thing that requires essentially kind of a team effort. The role that we take on this is primarily when it comes to the crime or quality of life issues that can come from many of these encampments. And we are certainly in tune, as the councilwoman said, to the fact that, these are issues that are literally sometimes in your front yard and definitely impact your quality of life. And we certainly understand that. So whether it comes from, some of the noise or the debris or the crime issues and the drug issues that sometimes are involved in this, we do have some resources with our narcotics unit that we direct towards some of these encampments as we get specific complaints. And then our senior lead officers are really the ones who are out there on the ground, working with other team members to try to address these issues. So whether that is through citations or working for the impounds to try to get these vehicles, and then making sure that the outreach and services are being provided to try to meet people's larger needs going on. But definitely a team effort. And I'll stop right there, and then obviously we'll be available later on for further questions.
Thank you, Captain. We also have Chief Aadi with LA Sanitation. Chief, if you want to unmute real quick and just talk about your role in LA Sanitation's role.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me this evening. My name is Chief Aadi, Livability Services Division with Sanitation. So our role out there is a support role we have with these RV dwellings throughout the city and throughout the district. So our roles out there is for our environmental compliance inspectors. We'll be out there to assess the trash and debris and property. We will process the property out on the public right of way, and we'll go through our procedures and policies in addressing those health hazards also that are also around these RV dwellings. We remove the health hazards from the public right of way, and to assist if there is a tow prep request, we will assist to make the vehicle available and clear around the vehicle so that the vehicle could be moved in a safe manner. And if there's any further questions, I'm available later on.
Thank you, Chief. And we also have our CAO with the CAO, Sophia Peralta. If you want to unmute, so I see you somewhere.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sophia Peralta. I'm the Director of Homeless Outreach with the Office of the City Administrator Officer. Our role in this whole process was to create a strategy to streamline the process amongst all departments. Prior to our citywide strategy, it was very challenging for folks to be able to address a vehicle dwelling, given that there's so many partners involved in these operations. So as a way to bring everybody together and clarify everybody's role in these efforts, our team was the lead entity in bringing everybody together on a weekly basis at this point and making sure that operations are happening smoothly and that everybody understands what role they play in. And mainly, as every department has stated, there's clarity now in terms of who does what on the ground. And so these operations are taking place across the city on a weekly basis. So it's not just within one district, it's across the entire city. And so the capacity in terms of staffing is always a challenge. Even amongst our team, there are a total of 5 of us that are working on this with council districts, with 15 council districts. So hopefully we continue to learn lessons from these operations and continue improving the process. So note that there are not just these departments, but multiple departments that have a role in any vehicle dwelling operation. And also note that every operation, every vehicle is very different. So it's not as it's a challenge that is ongoing, and that we continue to figure out some of the solutions as we go. So, thank you for having me.
Great, thank you, Sophia. And we also, with our city attorney's office, we have Veronica De La Cruz. If you want to say a couple words and introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm a deputy city attorney with the newly formed Community Law Corps. Yeah, we're about a month old at the city attorney's office. There's been a lot of restructuring in our office, but what's important to note is that this new Community Law Corps serves as the first point of contact for the public to the city attorney's office. So currently there are 3 attorneys assigned in this division for the city. We each get about 1/3 of the city. And our goal is to be preventative and proactive in measures to address a variety of issues and the affect our neighbors and our quality of life. One of the goals being on the municipal side is that we can work with our partners such as Council District 11 and all the council districts that we're assigned to work with, where there are legislative needs or other ways to look at fixing issues. we're able to work closely with our partners. And I know that CD11 has also already reached out, and we've had various discussions about different ways that we can change some of the way the city works in order to better address our issues. Prior to being in the Community Law Corps, I was a neighborhood prosecutor for about 8 years, assigned to West Los Angeles Police Station. So I have worked closely in the past with issues involving or affecting CD11. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, Veronica. And with that, that is the teams that we have with us right now. Again, as Sophia had mentioned, there are other subdivisions of each department that have their own role in this bigger process. But for us, especially here in the district, the people you see here are the departments that came out, are the ones that are more hands on the ground, boots on the ground with me and your field deputies to address your specific concerns here. So we, again, thank you all. And I will go a little deeper into the process and kind of where everyone's role is. So then again, we can have some questions at the end. Right now, I want to hand it over to our district director, Ms. Gabriela Medina, to go over the oversized vehicle ordinances and what we have been doing here in the district. Gabby?
Thank you, Juan. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Good evening, everyone. Gabby Medina with the Councilwoman's Office. I know there's been a number of questions regarding some of the city's ordinances around vehicle dwelling. And I wanted to detail two of the ordinances that pertain to occupied vehicles by individuals living in them. So the first one is the citywide oversized vehicle ordinance, which we call OVO in short. The second one is the Venice oversized vehicle restricted area. The citywide ordinance was established in 2004 through a motion by then Councilwoman Janice Hahn. The ordinance added a new section as well as amended certain sections of the municipal code to prohibit or limit parking of oversized vehicles on certain streets between 2 and 6 a.m. The ordinance was passed by the City Council in 2006 and adopted by the mayor shortly after. The council, what the ordinance detailed is that the council may authorize by a resolution the streets or the portions of the streets upon which the parking of oversized vehicles shall be restricted between 2 and 6 a.m. So this applies to anywhere in the city of Los Angeles, including Council District 11. Since taking office, Councilwoman Park has introduced 6 resolutions, of which each of them outline when they were introduced in council, the locations, the main streets, and the boundaries by which these restrictions take place, as well as the date that they happen. So the reason why this is important is because individuals will normally circulate a petition with their neighbors. It allows them to have a dialogue going. It allows for neighbors of that area to understand the restrictions that are coming. And these are all the locations that are currently either already been posted or are on a path to be posted. So she's introduced 6 locations covering 40 different regions throughout the district. Some of these do include locations in Venice, just east of Lincoln. The Venice oversized vehicle restriction was introduced in 2010 by then Councilmember Bill Rosenthal. And his motion designated a portion of Venice where vehicles of large size would be restricted. What he wanted to do, or at least intended to do, was to outline the significant impacts that are within this space of Venice and the coastal access sensitivity around the subject matter. So what he wanted to do was, instead of having the council member introduce a resolution, he wanted to simplify that version and create a letter. So since taking office, what we've done is we have received petitions from residents of those particular areas. And it's usually about 67%. And once we receive the petitions, we will go ahead and submit a letter to LADOT indicating that there is substantial support of these restrictions and that community members are in support of posting them. So since taking office, Councilwoman Park has issued 7 letters to DOT outlining the locations to be posted for vehicle restrictions within the Venice oversized restriction area. When it comes to the signs, Although in an ideal world, we would want the signs to be posted within 30 days. There are, as you can see, or close to 50 blocks that we have processed just within 10 months. And citywide, there's a couple hundred. So the department will usually receive the order, get the signs fabricated, and issue the order for posting. There is anywhere between a 3 to 4 month delay from when council adopts it or from when the department receives the letter. However, many locations are confirmed to have already been posted. And this kind of concludes my presentation on the different ordinances that apply to our district. So when you do have questions, make sure that you specify either the citywide, which pertains to the majority of CD11, or if it's the Venice specific one, which on the north, it's the boundary is City of Santa Monica. To the east, it's Lincoln, excuse me. To the south is the county line. And then on the west is Oceanfront Walk. Thank you, Juan. Juan, I believe you're muted.
Thank you, Gabby. And we will touch a little bit more again, as I know some questions will come up in terms of just regular enforcement when it comes to the OVO, as well as, again, the reason we're meeting, how it differs when a vehicle is deemed as a dwelling. So
Juan, I think you accidentally muted yourself.
all right, now I'm back. So I'm going to explain just roughly kind of what the processes are, again, when it comes to vehicle violations or RVs and vehicle dwellings. Again, there's kind of two portions to it. There's the actual vehicle itself that might be in violation of some sort. So that would be something you'd have to report through DOT. As I've mentioned, and Captain Price mentioned earlier, there are certain things they can enforce. Our office has requested and works with DOT and asked that they do cite any enforceable violations. We do not make that call, but the departments do have their protocols, and we have asked that if there are any violations that the department and their enforcement officers can enforce, please move forward with any citable violations. If you think there is just an abandoned vehicle that no one is in and is using, you can use the 1-800-ABANDON number. That is a number you can call and request the vehicle. Do have some basic vehicle descriptions when you call it in, and the nearest address for them to go. Again, this is a strictly abandoned vehicle that was left behind, and there's no kind of visible you can't visibly see that someone is living out of it. It's just a straight abandoned vehicle. Or if you don't know, you can call it, and then the officer will go out there and make that determination. Again, any violation of posted parking restrictions first need to go through the Department of Transportation. I know a lot of times individuals will report it to us directly, and we do work, again, closely with all our enforcement teams, especially DOT, but it is much better and faster for the department to try and address the violation that you're noticing or trying to get a dispatch officer to that specific location by calling the 213-485-4184. We ask that everyone report through that dispatch number first, and then call our office or send me and our your field deputy an email saying, I saw X, Y, and Z violation. I called parking enforcement, and here's the issue. We then can follow up with our DOT team and just confirm that that's happened and that there's a call log to try and get you a response on what happened when they went out there. Again, our officers do have limited deployment issues, which we'll discuss towards the end of the presentation. But again, every vehicle violation that you see should be reported through this number first. It does make the process easier even for our DOT departments. Right now, I'll go over briefly kind of what are some of the justifications for towing. Common justifications for towing include, but are not limited to, some of the following: obstructing traffic or blocking egress and ingress, public health or environmental hazard violations that you might see if the vehicle is involved in criminal activity, interfering with public work projects or special events, expired registration or unidentifiable vehicles, which means no license plates, their VINs are probably covered. And again, as I mentioned, the vehicle itself is abandoned. Again, all of that enforcement and citation and issuing can happen. What it takes to actually get a vehicle. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen, I was told. Excuse me, I apologize. Here we are. Thank you, Ashley, and that's why I appreciate her on our team. So I'll briefly go over what I had just mentioned, and let me go back so that you guys can get that number again. I apologize. Here's the number again for calling to report DOT. Again, 1-800-ABANDON, and the LA DOT Enforcement Dispatch 213-485-4184. And as I was mentioning, here are some of the items that are common justifications for towing. Keep in mind again that enforcement that leads to a tow of a vehicle dwelling does need to go through the process we are going to go a little deeper into, which, as Captain Tavani mentioned, mentioned earlier, they'll then deem it back to us, as well as Sophia and her team, that someone is living out of this vehicle. Can we schedule it through the citywide strategy that we're going to go into it right now. Again, there's a difference between, we are going to work with our enforcement teams to issue these citations. When we actually get to the point where we have to tow a vehicle for any of these violations, as the captain mentioned earlier, we do have to go through the vehicle dwelling process with Sophia and her team. And our goal again is going to try and give everybody a better picture of kind of what that process looks like right now. Let me see. So again, that's just reporting violations for the vehicle itself. So then we do have to also, as we had our sanitation team, we do have to also coordinate our sanitation teams to go out there and help us with some of the prep, which means we also have to report it through the encampment as an encampment, and we have to create a service request number, and that is usually through MyLA 311. You can either download the app or call, and we have to do this ourselves as well. So if you just call us and send a picture and say, hey, there's an encampment here, me, Ashley, or someone have to actively still go and create the service request number so that we can then coordinate our sanitation team. So that service request number is very important that we have it in the queue. If you can, and a lot of you actually do, I see who's on here. Once you report it and you get a service request number, send that number to myself and your field deputy and Ashley with the picture if you have it, so that we can then start that process and getting it scheduled with the sanitation teams. CD11 team will schedule a Care Plus service date with sanitation. Our Care Plus operations are the comprehensive cleanups that you may have seen out on the streets, where we have all the teams out there. That usually involves our environmental compliance inspectors. Sanitation brings out some of their heavier equipment. DOT is out there as part of that team to do lane closures, to do a street closure if needed, and to address any traffic safety concerns for all our departments, and workers to safely be operating on the ground. LAPD is also a part of that operation. Again, everyone plays a small role in this bigger picture, and being able to just ensure the safety of everyone there, whether it be the workers, PHs, they are there to just ensure the safety of all involved. And most importantly, we also have our LASA outreach teams. Ms. Carol, as I mentioned, is out there with me, who is our homelessness liaison, but she works closely with usually 2 of our LASA outreach workers at every site, both leading up to the cleanup, as well as the day of the operation. So if anyone is ready or has questions or is trying to get an update on where they are in terms of where getting housed or their services, we have someone on the ground to be able to talk to them and try and work them through that process. And we have been able to utilize some of our beds at our ABH or other interim housing resources at some of these to get people indoors. part of the reporting as well, I want to just let you guys know that, again, we have to schedule it through our Care Plus operations. We as an office get only 2 days per week. We get 1 per LAPD division. They are scheduled through our LAPD division. So typically Mondays is our West LA day. So most of our operations in West LA are done on Mondays. And then Wednesdays, we have a lot of our operations, most of our operations are done here in Pacific Division, which again is Wednesday. So we only get 2 Care Plus days per week. And again, every operation that is scheduled, especially when we get to having to coordinate with the CAO, has to be done in conjunction with this Care Plus day. So as you can see here in Venice or in the Pacific Division, we only get 1 day per week to try and execute one of these operations. And that itself takes some coordination. On the plus side, the councilwoman was very successful this last fiscal year in getting us a dedicated Coastal Care Plus team. That team, that is an additional team that will be dedicated to the coastal zone that Gabby briefly mentioned. And they will focus on helping address a lot of the issues with encampments, trash, right of way. And again, hopefully as we again coordinate more of our vehicle dwelling operations, we'll have an additional team out here, which will mean we have a 3rd day to be out there with an additional team. And we are the only district that got that additional team in the last year's fiscal budget. So Councilwoman and our legislative team worked really hard as soon as she came into office. And actually that is a pretty big win for us on the ground. Because again, our beaches, we know a lot of the issues that stem from homelessness encampments. So Councilwoman and the team worked real hard to try and get dedicated resources specifically to those areas that are impacted by homelessness along our beaches and the neighborhoods within those areas. Usually right now, I would say we have about a 3 to 5 week scheduling timeline for each new encampment site. That is a long ways, but also we've come a long way. When we first started, we were roughly at a 6 to 9 week kind of scheduling kind of window, where if a new encampment came in, it sometimes could take almost 7 to 8 weeks to be able to get that location on the schedule, just because of the need of specific sites. Or when we used to have Venice and Globe, that operation would almost take the whole day. So we would only get 1 location done, and the teams pretty much could only get to maybe 1 more site. So that does delay us a little bit in terms of, again, the resources on the ground. Our regular Care Plus operations will only address the public right-of-way around the RV and anything they want to voluntarily give up within the RV. This Care Plus operation alone does not get vehicles to move. It doesn't do any of that. That's where we have to, again, schedule this with the CAO and their team to kind of enhance that Care Plus operation so that we have the additional resources that are needed to, again, if we need to tow and or get some of the RVs prepped for tow. Again, and which is what I was getting to, requesting full clearing of vehicle dwellings on the street. Just because we've scheduled it for a Care Plus does not mean that it's going through the bigger operation that is these vehicles need to move. We do work on, and the goal is voluntary compliance for a majority of our operations. But again, in order for us to try and tow or fully enforce, it does need to go through the CAO's vehicle dwelling operations process. And that is, again, regardless of what the enforcement or the violation might be of the vehicle that I mentioned earlier in the previous slide, as well as regardless of whether it's scheduled for just a Care Plus operation. Again, the Care Plus operation alone will not ensure that a vehicle will move or anything like that. It will only address the right-of-way and the trash around that vehicle. Some quick background in terms of why we are here and why we have to coordinate with the CAO's team. And Sophia kind of briefly mentioned that earlier, so I don't want to step over her too much on that front. But they were tasked with the citywide rehousing strategy for people experiencing recreational vehicle homelessness. I've included the ordinance and we can share it. That goes a little deeper into kind of explaining why it is and how it kind of went into the CAO's kind of window of sorts. But in short, they are responsible to they're responsible to lift the city's parking enforcement moratorium. The CAO works with all the relevant city departments and LASA to connect people experiencing vehicular homelessness to the appropriate resources and to ensure the health and safety of all our public streets. And then again, why do we have to go through them? Again, the CAO, regardless of what the violation may be on the ground or anything that is going on, the CAO oversees the citywide comprehensive strategy, which again is similar to the Care Plus, but again, here's a part of what they have to go through. And again, it all starts with outreach and services. We do have to request that outreach go out there, or Sophia has to request outreach going out there to again specifically do outreach to the RVs and the vehicle dwellings. They have to we get a report back on kind of what the trash and debris is around that. Are there hazardous conditions that need to be addressed? Again, some of the parking or vehicle violations that I mentioned in the previous slide that we report to DOT. And again, is there any investigation that's needed to go into any ancillary criminal activity? There is, we have to give advance notice of parking enforcement and impoundment. Again, this is one of the important parts of that aspect of it, is that a notice of enforcement or impoundment has to be issued to any vehicle dwelling. So it has to be posted for no parking. Again, part of the outreach is that, hey, on X date, they're going to be enforcing and you do have to move your vehicle. When the signs go up is a minimum of 72-hour notice of them, again, after they've had the verbal outreach, and then the no parking signs will go up. There's 72 hours notice is that what has to be given to individuals if we are going to enforce anything for impoundment. Again, impounding vehicles and vehicle dwellings and abandoned vehicles, most of all of this goes through this process here, almost regardless of some of the other violations. There are some offhands where the departments can tow depending on certain circumstances, but for the most part, any vehicle deemed a dwelling will have to go through this additional process and has to get coordinated again through our Care Plus operations. So that is why, as some of you have heard through from a lot of our departments, this can take some time to, even though we know they've been cited, we've cleaned it up a couple of times. I can schedule a Care Plus operation to clean the trash and debris around the location. That does not mean I have the resources or Sophia's team have the resources on that specific Care Plus day. So we have to coordinate with, all right, is this location have a lot of trash and mess? Okay, it does. Let me address the trash first, because there isn't enough resources for a full operation to tow for another 2 or 3 weeks. So then that one, and that goes for every single location. In the district alone, I have over 30 to 35 that we are constantly working through on the queue. And again, as I've mentioned, our goal is always voluntary compliance. So sometimes, a lot of the times, the vehicles will move and then that area may be clear. Sometimes vehicles will leave or they'll go to other locations, and then we have to start that process all over again. Again, part of the coordination is the CAO. They oversee the citywide strategy. That is, again, why we have to go through them. I have to request additional resources from the vehicle dwelling operation, which again is Sophia, as I mentioned, and her team. I have to schedule the Care Plus day. The CAO team will then request additional resources through LA Sanitation. So some of those resources would be to get the vehicle ready for tow. That could mean there's trash on top of it and all around it. The tow truck will not take it if there's stuff on top of the RV. So sanitation will help us prep that. They also, a lot of the tow yards will request that the septic tank be clear and pumped of all hazardous materials. So sanitation would have to then schedule those resources as well on top of our Care Plus operation, so that if there is a tow, they're able to empty the septic tank as well as clear the whole RV of any trash and debris to have it ready for the tow yard to actually take it. So that is why we have to schedule it with our Care Plus Day. And Sophia and her team have to then make that additional request for those resources for our operations. Again, there's also deployment of homelessness outreach. The LASA teams will go out there and have more specific outreach to the individuals living in the vehicles to try and figure out what their needs are. Does the vehicle run? Will they be moving? Sometimes it's just, I need a jump, and they will work with them, help them get the jump. Other times, hey, I need to go buy a battery. Can I get a ride? So again, the goal is always to get voluntary compliance where we can. And our outreach teams go out there, give us kind of the lay of the land directly of what the needs may be. And a lot of the times they'll say, hey, there might be 6 RVs at this location. 5 of them said they will move on. 1 of them needs help with this, and they'll move. Others have said, we're going to go in, and they might voluntarily give up the RV. Again, every situation is very different. But that is why our outreach teams go out there to help us get a little better understanding of what the need is, and Miss Carol joins those teams as well. So again, not only do we have our outreach teams, we have our own internal team where Miss Carol and myself sometimes will go out there to really figure out what is going on at each location, so that I can come back and report back with all the departments more or less what we think is going to happen at this site. Then part of that request is the no parking. Again, as I mentioned, it's very important that for any vehicle dwelling to be ultimately impounded, if that's going to happen, is that they get notice of enforcement. And that needs to be a no parking, tow away parking restriction that is posted for the day of the operation. And that notice is going to be 72 hours, as I mentioned earlier. Then again, at that point, I will coordinate with Sophia and her team to let us know what is the OPD storage capacity, is how much storage room is there for us to be able to impound any vehicle if we do. I have to then report there's so many medium tows, a heavy tow, and then they report back what is available in the yard that day. This is what sometimes changes the day of the operation, because there is no way right now, and we'll go into it just a little bit in terms of what that is. There's no way for us to know in advance how much capacity we will have. We can go from 5 today, 0 in the morning, and then 2 by lunch tomorrow. That fluctuates very much, and that's usually one of the bigger issues that we come across on the ground, is the tow yard storage capacity. Then we go on to our choice date. Whatever day we have scheduled, roughly 3 to 4 weeks out, again, through this process, that is the day that we have to lock in, roughly 3 or 4 weeks out, as I mentioned, so that all this can take place on that choice date or the day of the operation. And for us, hope that there's capacity, hope we'll get voluntary compliance, and that we'll be able to get people indoors. And then, let me see. And that's kind of an overview of the process that that we do have to go through. We also, here, some of the things we have done since taking office, I want to give a brief kind of overview, and the councilwoman kind of touched on most of it earlier in her remarks, so I'll try and buy us some more time to catch up here. But we have been working with the CAO and our city partners through this process pretty much since we came into office, and well, we're going on the year now, to address most of the vehicle dwelling issues here on the west side. We have been very active. One of our biggest operations this summer was at the Bayona wetlands. A lot of you are probably familiar with it. This was a very important and environmentally sensitive site that had been impacted for many years. It took us roughly 6 months to coordinate all the needed resources. And that's, again, us transitioning in as a new office, collaborating with our partners and getting everyone an understanding of how our office will be operating. And then again, and you'll see right now, since that operation was so big, we did need a lot of partners and resources to help us coordinate this so that we could get to that point. Part of that, and we have cleared it since, and right now where we are is the wetlands is in the process of being restored. That has already happened. Some of the things that are coming to that whole stretch, we will have some resurfacing the next fiscal year for that Jefferson corridor right there between Culver and Lincoln. We're working on a protected bike lane with an art installation. That's some of the things we've discussed with some community members. The median that is there, working on a bigger beautification project to kind of bring that back to life. We've discussed gateway markers at each end of the median to try and beautify that and let people know you're coming into the wetlands and here you are. We're also requesting that DOT look at some traffic calming and speed reducing measures along this area. As if you've been there, biked there, walked there, or visited, you will know that a lot of the cars do speed through there sometime. When we did get full compliance of that location, our LAPD team was great in helping us put a speed marker out there that did help reduce some of the speed, but that is only a small band-aid in kind of some of the bigger things that we're looking at. With that, I just wanted to share again, most of you are familiar here at the wetlands. We had roughly anywhere between 40 to 60 vehicles at any given moment. A lot of these were, all of these were vehicle dwellings. Some of them were oversized vehicles. We had some buses, some big RVs like the one you see there. And again, each one of these is its own kind of operation, and individually we needed to figure out what were the needs, which one of them was inoperable, and what was the capacity going to look like for us to fully execute that. Fortunately, we got a lot of voluntary compliance at this location, but there were some vehicles that ultimately had to get towed. But again, it was roughly a 1-month operation, and it took us, as I mentioned, almost 6 months on our end to kind of get everything in order to ultimately get this location in full compliance. Here's kind of where we're at now after. We continue to monitor it daily. We also, again, are working closely with a lot of the nonprofit organizations in the area to beautify the area, as I mentioned, and work on some of those projects. So the process that we took here is the same process that we take essentially throughout the whole district. Keep in mind that, again, this was an environmentally safety hazard all around for us. So this was a priority that we wanted to focus on and clear up. And it took a lot of, again, working with our partners to get the resources lined up specifically for this project that we don't and can't pull for every single operation throughout the district. Because as Sophia mentioned earlier, there are citywide operations going on daily, especially for us. And our end, we do have to coordinate as well with CD5 and their operations because we share the same resources. So that is another kind of layer of things that we won't get too much into right now, but we do have to share and collaborate with CD5 and their operations so that, again, we can do our best to balance the need, not only here in our district, but citywide. Here are some of the numbers from the operations we've done through the CAO over the last year with the map of kind of some of the sites and locations. And if there's questions about this, I can have Sophia speak on this a little later. But right now there's been a total of 21 dwelling operations completed, 101 vehicle dwellings assessed for intervention, 11 citations, again, through this process. This is just through this process. This doesn't include just DOT's day-to-day operations, and when you call that number, that does not include those in this number. And through those operations, we've impounded roughly about 19 vehicles. Again, the goal is always voluntary compliance for us, but we have, when needed, impounded vehicles through this process. Sanitation throughout all those operations has collected 47,000, almost 48,000 pounds of solid waste that's been collected, and just over 3,100 pounds of hazardous waste collected. And there's been 6 instances of storage services used. Again, if you have questions about some of this, Sophia can better help us explain with some of those. But that kind of is where we are right now in terms of just some of the things that we've done. I wanted to briefly go over some of the challenges so we can open it up now for some questions so that everyone gets an idea. Again, one of the primary challenges facing RVs operations has been the failure in the sense of the city contracted tow trucks to respond and remove those vehicles that are either burned, abandoned, or otherwise pose a significant environmental and safety risk. We, the OPG or our police garages are very limited to perform their contracted service agreements because of, again, the lack of storage space and the actual process for us to dismantle or destroy those RVs. So not only do we not have the space, again, as I mentioned earlier, when we go to an operation, hey, we only have one heavy tow available, but I've got 5. We have to figure out what we can do. We also have a backlog of the RVs that have already been towed or these oversized vehicles that are already in possession at the tow yards now being dismantled. So that also adds to the backlog that we have to work through on the back end to figure out, again, do we have the space and the resources to fully enforce and get compliance of any one vehicle dwelling location, regardless of what the violations may be. Again, through this, we have our CID, which is the Commission of Investigation Divisions, that has submitted a request for proposal to establish a vehicle recycling program for dismantling contract to dispose of unsafe, unclaimed RVs, boats, and other vessels. Again, this is them reaching out to figure out how we can dismantle these faster to free up some of our storage space. Although we always work with voluntary compliance, we do need more housing to fully enforce all the vehicle dwellings. The most important resource that we do not have beyond just tow capacity and some of the things that I've mentioned is housing. We need more long-term non-congregate housing and more permanent housing for individuals or families that are living out of their RVs. What we have found is that when we offer a more stable living situation, even if it is interim, it does need to be roughly between 12 months or 24 months. What I mean by that is if there is someone living out of their RV and they won't just give it up for a 2-week motel voucher. You know, that is where we have to coordinate and see if we can get them a more long-term stable living situation. Ideally, we can get them into permanent housing. And if we have that option available for them, then a lot of the times we do get voluntary compliance, as well as they'll voluntarily give up their RVs. Or even sometimes a motel, as long as it's minimum 12 months, to 24 months, or for 1 to 2 years. We have found that we get a better return on compliance if we're able to offer more of those permanent, long-term, non-congregate housing options. And what I mean by non-congregate is whether it be a tiny, a motel room, a tiny home, or again, permanent housing. It's very hard to say, hey, I have a bed open at our ABH, give up your RV. Most individuals living out of their vehicles will rather stay there because that is more of a permanent solution for them in the immediate, as opposed to a congregate setting like a shelter or something like that. So again, the most important resource that we are lacking, especially here on the west side, is long-term interim housing. Again, some of the other things that we as a city, as well as all our departments, are working through is exploring a RV 24-hour safe parking model, because right now we do have safe parking throughout the city, but they cannot accommodate RVs or oversized vehicles. They are strictly for vehicles that are your standard vehicles, standard sedan, maybe a van, but anything that's oversized or an RV, you cannot utilize those resources. So I know we have safe parking, but we don't have them for RVs. And that is one of the ongoing solutions that we are looking for to try and bring on here on the west side or just anywhere in the city. Again, currently there's not for that, and they're limited to 12 hours, which is usually only overnight. And most RVs are not trying to move day in and day out. So most safe parking operations that we currently have will not be suitable for these oversized vehicles, as well as some of the program enrollment requirements that's needed. Some of the other things that are being discussed currently, there is some state legislation. There's a DMV process for disposing of vehicles that are valued at 500 or less. There is a request to amend section 22670 and section 22851.3 of the California Vehicle Code to define a low-value vehicle at 2,000 or less. That will allow for vehicles that pose a nuisance to bypass the lien process and expedite the disposal of these vehicles. So again, there's a lot of, and a lot of this information again can be found in the council file here. I will share, we can share some of these council files for you guys to dig into some of these a little more. A lot of these reports are anywhere from 12 to 14 pages long, and probably each one would deem its own meeting. So we're just kind of giving a good overview of some of these things right now. Kind of what is next before we get into questions, just to give everybody a quick overview. We will continue to work through our city process right now. That is the process that we have. As the councilwoman mentioned, we are now part of the mayor's task force when it comes to the mayor's RV task force to not only address the crisis here in our Better 11, but as well as the city's overall plan for addressing vehicle dwellings. So our office is now a part of that in terms of trying to figure out the bigger solution for when it comes to vehicle dwellings. A lot of what we are requesting is, as I mentioned, resources to streamline the current process that we have. This is the process. It seems to be working. We just need, again, more resources. Part of that, as I've mentioned, we're hoping we can do some partnership with more Inside Safe to get more long-term, interim and permanent housing solutions to offer to these vehicle dwellings. Again, we're actively looking not only here as well as citywide where we can find safe storage sites for RVs. So not only do we need somewhere to tow those vehicles that have been impounded, there are some vehicles that individuals want to keep. So yes, I'm willing to go in. Can you give me somewhere to safely store my RV? Well, I go through this process so that I don't lose it. That is an additional option that a resource that we are exploring. Again, the city is assessing various properties throughout the district to help with, not the district, through the city, to assess some of the overflow issues with our tow yards. A lot of our departments, as I've mentioned, everything we have to go through to schedule these, we do need to have our department staffed. Again, all the way down from enforcement on the ground to the operations that we quickly walk through. We do need people to man or women those operations with us. So a lot of our departments are also very stretched thin, even our CAO team, as Sophia mentioned. Again, Councilwoman is very active in a lot of legislation in terms of trying to address some of those concerns, and we continue to work through it all. So again, we will start the process of taking questions. I know this is kind of a deeper dive. Just real quick for you guys, myself and Ashley have met with community members to go more specific to go deeper into specifics in terms of your locations or your concerns. So now we do want to open this up for questions. More broadly, I know if you have more specific sites, we may not get too deep into the nuances of each location, but we can schedule meetings with you and or your neighbors to go deeper into what that process would look like on your block. With that, Jacob, I will hand that over to you so that we can take some questions, at least for the next 45 minutes to an hour for some of us.
I just want to chime in real quick before we open this up to questions and say thank you for that very, very comprehensive dive into the process and some of the challenges and issues that we're having, as well as the work that we're doing. And for, constituents who are in this call, we have to give answers as a council office that no, we don't just have on-demand interventions and someone that we can call today to come and tow a vehicle. I know that's frustrating for folks to hear, Juan. So thank you for sharing all of this information so that people have a sense of the scale of what we have to navigate as a council office and the various departments and the aspects of this. And so the streamlining of this process, the securing of additional resources is going to be a significant focus for me personally, as well as your entire CD11 team. as we finish out the rest of this year and move into next. So, all right, we will move on to questions. Thank you so much, all of you.
Yeah, and so I will be going through folks and giving them permission to unmute to ask a question. Just a reminder, if you could keep your comments and question to under 1 minute so that we can then get through as many as possible, that would be much appreciated. And I will give you a reminder at the 45-second mark. So with that said, we'll go into questions and we'll start off with David Akelson.
Hi, can you hear me? Thank you
Yes.
very much, Juan. That was incredibly enlightening. And obviously the barriers and the hoops that you have to jump through is fairly incredible. And I realize we don't want to dwell on individual sites, but if you don't mind, I've seen you outside the First Lutheran Church at 815 Venice Boulevard. And I'm now aware your presentation, obviously, I saw you there with a Care Plus program. For you to get that, the hoops that you have to jump through to get those towed are now very, very obvious. It seems to me that the one deterrent that locals can have, that the residents can have, would be through the LADOT, because those RVs are currently parked next to signs that say no oversized vehicles 2 a.m. to 6, no parking 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. nightly, and no parking 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Wednesdays. So amid all the hoops and the barriers that you're facing to get them towed, is the one resource we may have as residents to call LADOT? And to Captain Price, do we actually have to call you every night during those hours of enforcement to get somebody to come out and ticket?
Captain, do you want to touch on that? But yes, to my understanding, you do have to call that when you see that violation. I know it's tough. But again, this location, just real quick, there is an operation that is there is a public works project that will be coming in shortly that we're already working through to try and get compliance and let those individuals know that there's actual work going on there. And if you want more specifics on that, Ashley and Sean can give you an update on that, but that site is going through our process currently because there is an upcoming city project that's coming in. Captain, is that correct? Every as I mentioned earlier, yes, every time there's a violation and you want enforcement, it does need to be called in. And I know that the 2 a.m. one is rough. And again, that will only most likely lead to citation. In order for us to execute the tow, as what I think everyone wants to get to, we have to go through this process.
Yes, Juan, that is correct in regards to the impounds, for the 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. I am aware that it does say impound as well, but at the time those signs were posted, we weren't dealing with an RV issue, we were dealing with their vehicles. So now that Juan eloquently explained the process, it's a different process with RVs, which takes longer because they have to verify if they have a tow truck available and all the other stuff, as opposed to a regular vehicle that we can just call the official police garage and request enforcement. And I believe your second question, sir, was, do you have to call DOT every single time for enforcement? Yes and no. Specifically for the off shift, for the day shift, I have approximately on any given day, if everybody reports, maybe 60 to 75 officers, but at night I have a minimal deployment, and that could be anywhere from 4 to 6 officers that is responsible for not only CD11, but the whole Western area. So unfortunately, the plan is to have an officer assigned to each area, and they're supposed to go and enforce throughout their course of their shift. However, if anything happens outside of that we have to reallocate resources somewhere else, they may not necessarily be able to go over there and enforce it throughout the whole night. And then therefore you would need to call, and then we would make sure we put that request in queue.
Might I just add, this is on top of a department that I think has 70 or.
We can't hear you, Councilwoman. I don't know if it's your audio or not. It's no, you're unmuted.
It says I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, kind of, yes.
All right, well, I'll talk louder. I just wanted to mention that this is on top of about 70 vacant enforcement positions in your department. And so to describe that we are working with a skeleton crew is not really a stretch. I mean, we are talking about vast swaths of the city and vast routes and very, very few boots on the ground. So that is something that we are working on at the council level in terms of funding and recruitment efforts. But it is another complication on top of this.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
All right, thank you so much. And we will go to Georgina next.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank CD11, Tracy, and everyone on this call. You have done an amazing job with the West Side, with our area, and I really appreciate it. My question is there anything going on to remove RVs that are parked in the vicinity of schools? To me,
Georgina, thank you for that. So my motion, which is currently making its way through committees here at City Hall, would ban RVs around schools, parks, daycares, and I don't think they belong in our neighborhoods or in front of local businesses either. So that is in the process now. We will keep you posted on the progress of that motion through my weekly newsletters. For folks that haven't signed up, you can do that at the CD11 website. We will let you know when those things are being scheduled for hearings. And it would be very helpful if people would submit public comments either online or show up at City Hall for committee meetings and then in council, so that my colleagues on City Council can hear directly from you how important it is that we start putting some rules and guardrails that protect our local communities.
Thank you. And just to kind of touch on that a little, I know sometimes we have to clarify that some of the 4118 signage around our sensitive use sites now does not pertain to vehicle dwellings. And that is why the councilwoman introduced the motion. I know sometimes people will say, hey, this is a church or school, they shouldn't be here, the signs here. And you're right, the right-of-way encampments should not. But vehicle dwellings do not fall under that. And that's why the councilwoman introduced that motion.
All right, next we will go to Russ. If you could unmute yourself and you'll have 1 minute to ask a question and give any comment.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for doing this. A quick question. Daily, well, I'm in a neighborhood that daily we have new RVs pulling in from out of state. I watch them drive down the road looking for parking. Now they can park, they take their license plates off, they stay for days, weeks, months, they're not moved at all. We have enforcement signs we've had them for years, the no overnight parking 2 to 6. If we call, no one shows up. If we call and say, if they do show up, they'll say, oh, somebody's living in that. So how do you see this as a problem of your own making? You're enabling people to come from all over the country in these broken down RVs. They can park, they can stay forever, live at the beach, and now you want to give them 2 years free housing. What's going to stop it?
Yeah, so Russ, I hear your frustration, especially with the inflow of vehicles that, didn't originate in our communities. And so one of the challenges that has allowed for this, one was the pandemic and the suspension of enforcement around encampments and vehicular dwellings. Another piece of it has been litigation targeted at prior pieces of our municipal code that allowed for more robust enforcement of vehicle dwelling. And one of the things that I am trying to do now as a council member is restore some of those legal tools that we needed in order to address this issue, so that we don't have vehicles that are just rolling into our neighborhoods and posting up wherever they want for as long as they want. The problem that we have right now is that we don't have those legal tools on the books, and thus my motion. And it's also with respect to the enforcement component of it, you know, I'll defer to DOT on timeliness of responses and what, you know, when they can come and when they can't. But, you know, this is compounded by a lack of actual bodies and resources to do enforcement work, even in places where we have obvious violations and people are parked in violation of signage. So I hear your frustration, but I think once we have the landlord ordinance and we can get some guardrails around where these vehicles can and can't be via my motion, and we have the set of citywide protocols rolled out, I think we're going to start seeing some improvements. And what I will commit to you, Russ, is the same commitment that I have made to addressing tent encampments in the district. We are going to be strategic. We are going to be methodical. We are going to be compassionate. And I am personally going to bring the determination and will to get it done that has gotten us where we are today. So I hear you that there's frustration around this. Believe me, I am frustrated by it as well, but it's not acceptable for any of us. And we are doing everything we can as quickly as we can to try to change this so that we have.
All right, next we'll go to Daryl.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I wanted to thank you, Tracy. You have done and are doing a wonderful job, And Juan, I don't know how you keep all that information in your head. One thing I want to mention, because it is in connection with this, is the homeless count. We do not have a actual count of the homeless in all of the city of Los Angeles, I think the county, and I know that you're working on that. And the reason I mention it in terms of what we're talking tonight, because one of the information is dwellings count, and there are cars or trucks that they look at, vans or SUVs, and they also look at RVs or campers. So that's information we don't have, we absolutely need. And LASA has come out in their last report on page 6 of the report. They are not going to give the count for the communities. It's unheard of. I'm upset. I'm taking more of your time. Thank you.
Daryl, I hear your frustration. And, you know, a few months ago when we came together as a community to go over the loss of numbers, you heard me say it then, that without a neighborhood by neighborhood count, as a policymaker who is responsible for evaluating where and when and how to deploy resources, deciding which resources to advocate for more of, or evaluating what kinds of housing interventions we need to bring online in CD11, I can't do that without neighborhood specific data. And I have made that clear to LASA. And as I said in my remarks at the top of the meeting, I recently met with Supervisor Horvath, who you know is now the LASA chair as well. And I made a specific request for that information. I share your frustration about not having it. It's a problem and a challenge for us, and it's something that I am going to keep pushing until we have it.
Next, we'll move on to Sonia, if you could unmute.
Yes, hi. I'm going to, of course, say thank you to Juan, thank you to Tracy. I'm going to give my husband the voice or the microphone. And he can
Go right ahead.
Hello, Councilwoman Park and Juan, thank you very much. We really appreciate your hard work and dedication to this beautiful city of angels. And we are part of the community and we want it to be better. We have a beautiful house in Venice and we have endured quite a bit of a hectic time for the last 7 years. Not 2, not 3, 7. Things went downhill since 2015, and that's just my observation as a resident of the city. We live on very close to Venice Boulevard, right by the 595 South side. And there's an empty lot there and 2 RVs that have been basically harassing us for 7 years.
You have 10 more
And
seconds.
I'm just gonna go really fast here. There's a woman that's mentally ill, screaming all the time. She has dogs barking at 3 a.m, waking me up. I've had a lot of things to deal with, psychological stress, and I even had cancer because of this, and my vocal cords because I had to scream. I don't know if you can hear my frustration, but there are only 2 RVs that have been doing this to us, not 200, 2. I would love it if you guys can do a little bit of focus on this area and clean them out. That's all I'm going to say at this point. I can help in any way I can. And I really appreciate your listening to me. That's all. I don't want to say any more than that.
Thank you. And Councilwoman,
Sonia's husband, I didn't catch your name, so I'm sorry, but thank you for those comments. And yes, I do hear your frustration. And let me just say, no family, no resident, no business should have to put up with that kind of stuff in front of their home at any time. And so my apologies that this has persisted for so long. Thank you for recognizing that this crisis in our community on the west side of Los Angeles is years and years in the making. And like I said at the top, the scale of this has gotten so bad that what it is going to take to fix this is going to be an immense effort. We're up for the task. We are down to do the work, but it is going to take some time. As to your specific issue and location, we are aware of it. We are working on it. And I would ask that you maybe just so we can get to some more questions tonight, I'll have you connect with Juan and your field deputy, and we can kind of speed you up on some of our thoughts and plans for that location. But I do hear you, and you have my commitment to do everything I can across the entire district and then the city to deal with these issues.
And I think we've met in person, Councilwoman. I know your site, and I've met with your neighbors. There is only 2 left. As you may know real quick, there were several RVs there, and we have reduced that footprint, and we continue to work with our neighbors and through our resources. The remaining individuals are definitely, it is going to take a little bit more work and coordination beyond just what we went over today. But that one, I know exactly where you are, and that it is on our short list as well.
All right, we will move to Barry. If you could unmute.
Hi, Juan, I feel for you. You know, I think a lot of us are frustrated because we see what seems to be commonsensical things that aren't happening. But after you explain what you have to go through, it's obvious that we're dealing with a system that is decoupled from common sense. But I do want to like sort of reaffirm what Russ said. You know, we're all very frustrated because we all know locally, we live here, none of these RV dwellers are local. At least half of them are from out of the state or out of the country. We have a new one from British Columbia on our street right now. So it sounds like the minute somebody pulls in from British Columbia and parks, they're entitled to, you can't do anything about them unless you go through this gigantic process.
More seconds.
Thanks, Barry, for sharing that. As you know, we've done a lot of work on your block, and let us know. We'll continue working on that specifically to get that addressed as well. Again, I think on your block, there's definitely some work for, at least I'm optimistic that we can get more voluntary compliance, but sorry if maybe you did send that, but send that over so we can start working on that right away. Part of this is also making sure that our team knows. As you see, we have a lot of things going on our end with various operations. So as soon as our team knows, especially with Ashley, I mean, you worked with Ashley and now you'll have Sean as well. We can stay on top of locations that we've been able to maintain or got compliance on in the past.
All right, next we will go to Lisa.
Yeah, hi, good evening. My concern is that after you detail all the complexities to go through to cite people and slowly find ways to find fault with citations and health and hazards to get something towed, you kind of almost put the cart before the horse, because after you went through all the complexities of laying out how to tow something, you briefly mentioned we don't have safe parking for RVs and we don't have enough housing. So my concern is, how are you doing this when we don't have those kind of things in place? On top of, you even mentioned over and over again that you're short staffed. So this could be even happening so much quicker when we still don't have the housing resources or safe parking resources. And through different things going through committees, we're making more and more places for where people can't be. So where are people supposed to go when they have no place to go? On top of, how do we do this without the housing and the other things and resources in place?
Lisa, thank you for the question. And let me be very clear about this. Juan focused on the amount of outreach that goes on in connection with every single one of these. And when we are doing an intervention, we always lead with services, and our effort is always to try to get voluntary compliance. And Juan repeated that multiple times tonight during his discussion when he talked about the process. You raise a good point. We do not have adequate long-term solutions that give us the tools to be able to do this on a large scale. In some cases, when it's about getting compliance, asking someone to move, they're moving, right? We are not trying to displace people. And like I said, we work very, very hard for weeks and months in advance, especially on a large operation, to make sure that we do have services and interim housing solutions with pathways to permanent housing available. And part of the reason we don't do these more often is because we have to wait for those resources to become available. We have to wait to turn beds before we can do another one. One of the things I mentioned in my comments that I am really proud of, we have one of the highest retention rates. And CD11 is actually moving quickly to get people through interim housing and into permanent housing. So I hear you. And we will continue with that approach. The engagement and the outreach and the voluntary compliance is always our primary mission in this. We only move to enforcement when we have to.
All right, next we will go to Sean.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was so worried tonight would be a dog and pony show. I'm still skeptical. I in my block, we have OVO signs posted. We had problems with an uninhabited RV that parked on our street. It took 4 weeks to get it moved. We called them, after a week, and then it was 72 hours. They said they moved it like 3 inches, which they didn't, but that's what DOT said. And it took another 3 weeks to get that RV. It was actually a bus, and it was uninhabited. But regardless of that, the whole idea of enforcement of license plates, registration, that's not being enforced. And if there are any tickets, St. Joseph's is paying those tickets. It's a whole whack-a-mole scenario where whether it's an encampment, excuse me, let me finish. Whether it's an encampment or a vehicle, it's a whole whack-a-mole thing that it's being moved. And, we are frustrated. We want to ask you to stop coddling the criminals, start supporting your constituents. And, it's ridiculous. It's like we pay, our tax dollars pay to make our life better. We pay for schools, we pay for libraries, we pay for street improvement. And then now we're paying for RVs from out of state, out of country, whatever, and this goes on to the encampments. And I want to thank Tracy Park, and I want to thank her office. And I want to thank all you guys. You've done a phenomenal job. You've done more for Venice than I could have ever imagined in the few months that you've been in office. But these problems still exist. And I want to cite something with my with Medina, that there has been no court settlement, that the courts dictate that we need to provide shelter to people that are in RVs and vehicle dwellings. The court is not mandating that you provide homes and services to people residing in RVs and vehicle dwellings. There's no court supporting this.
Sean, you've been given over 2 minutes. If you could just wrap up, please, so we can make sure to get all these questions.
Yes, thank you. Stop the mandate of Eric Garcetti that imposed the moratorium on the enforcement, and clean it up. Thank you so much, Tracy. Thank you so much for all you guys. Love you, but we're getting frustrated. Thank you.
I hear you, Sean, and I'm just going to harken back to what Barry said earlier. This is a system decoupled from common sense, and it has been for a long time, which is why my team and I are giving you the information tonight on what the system is and our role on the task force to try to create better, more efficient systems with more timely responses. And we here in CD11, through our motions and the work that we have done on the ground and are continuing to do with tent encampments and vehicular homeless, is literally setting the bar for what all council offices should be doing. And we are moving the needle on this discussion citywide in a way that nobody else has done in years. So I hear you, and we are going to keep moving the needle on it, Sean.
All right, next we will go to Daphne. If you could please unmute.
Hello, good evening. My question is, one gentleman did voluntary surrender his RV and took housing, but he came back and there was a shooting. So now that we have another shooting over here in Westchester, Ladera Heights area, does that expedite our requests to have the RV encampment on Centinela removed?
Yeah, we talked about this on that front. That does not change the procedure on that front. It would only address that specific individual. We do have a lot of safety concerns at a lot of our locations. Unfortunately, that does not change the process that we have to go through. We have had similar situations at some of the other locations that were brought up by some of your other neighbors here in the district, where that's happened. Where we can, we will work closely with our LAPD team. Again, now we're talking more of a murder or something like that happened, to see where, if there are other avenues we could explore specifically to that RV or specific vehicle. It doesn't change the dynamic for the entire encampment itself, though.
All right, next we'll move to Mindy, if you could please unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, great. I've been involved in a group, Venice Community Coalition, for over 20 years doing outreach, not outreach, but beneficial things on Lincoln Boulevard. Anyway, I provided Ashley with a summary, a friend of mine and I put together of parking lots, city parking lots, and these things that these RVs could be directed to. That's what has to happen. We have to dedicate parking, open parking places, or city lots, what have you, for this RV parking, RV and cars. And then the camping is another story. But I don't understand why we are setting ourselves up to be, to have all these dependents relying on the city, county, and state and country to pay for housing, because they flop onto the street. I'm sorry, but a lot of people choose this kind of living situation. A lot of people are forced into it because of the rent and the housing expensive fiasco that we're living through. But there has to be solutions. And I live on East Venice, and we have less protections over here on the east side than the west side does because of the Coastal Commission and
10 more
various
seconds.
protections. And so this needs to be taken seriously. It needs to be provided for with services and everything, but we shouldn't be in a position to take on dependence for life. It's not sustainable. The hotel rooms are not sustainable. This whole thing has to be restructured in the entire country. And, in our state, you guys all have to work together with the governor and all the powers that be, because this is a huge problem for your constituents, for you. You've done a fabulous job compared to Mike Bonin, who gave us a real black eye in Venice here, because he was so destructive with his open homeless policies. Anyway,
Sorry
really
to interrupt.
appreciate
I'm gonna jump in with you here. First of all, thank you for your volunteer work and your advocacy over the last 20 years. Part of my motion asks where these vehicles can go in the meantime, and we are looking at all available sites. The mayor's team, as well as evaluating all government-owned sites, and so we are looking at every different option we can for both parking and storage. Whatever the reason that someone is living in an RV, the city of Los Angeles was not set up with the infrastructure that is necessary to support thousands of people living in vehicles on our city streets without services. So this is untenable. It cannot continue. We have got to have both short-term and long-term solutions to address this. I agree with you. We cannot afford to build new housing or to pay for housing for the entire nation's homelessness problem. And we know that this is not just a city of LA problem. This is a regional problem, a state problem, and a national problem. And I do not disagree with you that it is unfair for local taxpayers to have to shoulder this entire obligation. And there's a whole lot of policy around what you're saying. And those are things that I'm working on legislatively inside here at City Hall. So I hear your concerns and frustrations on that, Mindy, and thank you for your work and your advocacy in the Venice community.
And just to add to that, one of the things I didn't generally cover in the whole list of things we're working on, I do know that part of the requests in terms of next actions or things that the city is looking at is some of the lots that are sent over by constituents sometimes in theory work good, but then there are some zoning issues when it comes to storing those oversized vehicles that is being looked at to see if we could tweak some of those to be able to utilize them for some of these purposes. So again, there's a lot of moving pieces when it comes to that.
All right, and just for the sake of making sure we get through as many questions as possible with the time we have, I just want to remind folks that the minute that you have, I'm going to give you a 15-second warning, and then once we get to a minute, I will mute you just so we can make sure to move on. So please try to get to your question as quickly as possible. So now I'll move to Jill.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you guys for having this communication. Please keep it going. It at least like lets people blow up some steam. I think that hearing the exhaustive processes that are in place to try to move even one individual RV is useful for people to hear, because I do think it points out for anyone who's paying attention the illogic, as you're saying, Tracy, of the system. Because I know all of the ways to report. All of my neighbors know how to report, and the difference between calling in an OVO or an abandoned vehicle and a dwelling versus a vehicle that's empty. And it doesn't work because if your goal is voluntary compliance, then as you say, someone can just move after months. Thank you very much. After months of staying there, if the question is, will we find permanent housing? What stops people from coming in? And then there not being housing for the people who are moving in, unless there are ordinances that are keeping people from parking on the street. So I just want to say, Tracy, I know you're trying to get your motion put through to get the legal tools in place. What can we really do? This reporting is something that we've been doing for years, very intensively recently. Tracy, how can we help you? Thank you, as constituents, to circumvent this and actually help you.
Yeah. So Jill, thank you for asking that. First of all, I just again want to acknowledge everyone's frustration. This is a problem. We all see it. We know what the issues around it are. We know the impacts that it's having in our community. And I want to manage some expectations around this. I don't have a magic wand. I don't have an unlimited credit card. I don't have good working tools. I have a system that is bureaucratic and broken. We've got staffing. You've heard all the issues that we have. It is going to take time, significant time, for us to marshal the resources that we need to bring interventions like we did at Jefferson, for example, on scale for the district and then for the city. So what the things are that you can do: continue to work with my team, help us on the local strategies as we are doing our micro responses to immediate problems and impacts in CD11, but stay engaged with us and show up when we need you at public comment in committees and at city council. The things that I am trying to do, the things that I am pushing for, are not universally supported in city council or even across city departments. And I think it is absolutely essential that my colleagues on council hear from you. So when you read about a motion that I have made, take 5 minutes and drop a public comment write a public comment and post it to the council file. Even better, I know it's a pain, but make time to come down for our meetings when we need to have that community voice be heard. And then in the meantime, just be patient with us, stay engaged, come to our meetings, stay engaged in the process while we try to slog our way through cleaning up this mess and making sure that people who are frankly living in deplorable circumstances have opportunities to get the help they need and a pathway to a better future, whatever that pathway is.
All right, next we will go to Mary Smith.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Tracy and your staff, for having this very dynamic conversation. I have 4 points. The first one is we submitted questions or had an opportunity to submit questions, and I'm wondering if any of those questions are going to be addressed that we submitted online. Number 2, like to know the status of the encampment RVs vehicles at Culver and the 90. Number 3, there are additional tents going up and have been up there west of Hyperion along Playa del Rey beach area. Like to know what's happening with that. And the status of the RVs at Glencoe. Has the city looked at LAX vacant lots or identified other vacant lots, or the Playa del Rey acreage of that whole neighborhood that was removed due to eminent domain by LAX in
You have 10 more
the
seconds.
70s. I'm a retired family nurse practitioner. I represent the Land Use Committee of Delray Residents Association. I've worked in the community for over 35 years, providing healthcare to homeless people and people without any insurance. I've also owned a home here for 23 years. No one deserves to be on
All
the
right, you
street.
could complete your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary, thank you for that. So all of those locations that you mentioned, Cobra in the 90, we do have a plan in place. There's actually some Caltrans work that is scheduled to be done there. Let's talk about the specifics of that separately. Dockweiler, we do continue to monitor. We actually have been deploying our Care and Care Plus teams there. The good news is that when we get our coastal Care Plus team that is dedicated exclusively to the coastal zone, that will free us up to move our existing Care and Care Plus resources to other parts of the district and focus our coastal zone team here. And Playa del Rey and Dockweiler are going to continue top priorities for us. Glencoe, I don't think there are any RVs left on Glencoe. You may recall earlier this year, we partnered with the community to do some street work improvements there, including the bollard protected bike lane. And so there are no longer any RVs on Glencoe. With respect to the LAX lots, yes, the mayor and her team, pursuant to her emergency declaration and various executive directives, are assessing all government-owned parcels and properties, including LAX, for potential storage. The lot that you mentioned, the former Surfridge community, has been evaluated before. I believe the mayor's team and LAWA are talking about it. However, those were homes that were eminent domained back some decades ago, and as a result, those parcels cannot be used for housing interventions. So there may be suitable for storage or other things, but the mayor is working directly with LAWA and the federal regulators on the airport related property. So thank you for that question and your continued patience and partnership as we move forward on these issues.
And yes, to answer one of her last questions, we will follow up with anything that was submitted prior if it hasn't been answered here.
All right, we'll go to Jenny. If you could please unmute, you'll have a minute.
Forgive me for the delay there. Many thanks to you, Councilwoman Park, and to Juan for all your efforts, and particularly this evening for illuminating what is no doubt an extraordinarily problematic and complicated process. I live here on Horizon with my husband and baby, and we appreciate the work that you've done on our particular block. One question, as part of the process in that last stage, talking about storage capacity in the official police garages, how is it that the storage capacity changes so dramatically? And particularly if there's only a single Care Plus day, how is it that we as a council can't reserve a spot for a large vehicle that you know is going to be towed?
Because it's, as Sophia mentioned earlier, every day there's citywide operations going on, specifically to this process that we discussed. On top of, again, there are tows that happen to boats, to other things that there's accidents, things that happen where those would take priority sometimes. So There's a lot of different factors that come into play when it comes to being able to reserve it. We do, at least on our end, our best to try and get that going, but we can't just say, hey, we need 5 slots, so hold them for, at least right now, 3 weeks until CD11 is able to come in. Because again, this is just an influx throughout the city. We're not the only ones that are going through these operations, as Sophia mentioned earlier. There's a lot of moving pieces when it comes to that. And again, on top of just standard heavy tows that get towed through the other normal processes that aren't vehicle dwellings. Again, sometimes things happen with accidents where a large vehicle then has to be impounded for whatever reason. And that would probably take the space even if I did reserve it, something like that happens. Just certain things that are out of our control.
Hi, Juan. I just wanted to add one reminder. These OPGs service the entire city. So it's not just, addressing encampments, RVs, it's servicing, if your vehicle gets into an accident, they tow it to these yards. So I know the Commission Investigation Division has been working diligently to try and secure additional locations. But one of the things that was done in a recommendation that just moved from one of the committees on housing and homelessness is the ability to contract with the dismantler, for the city to actually have a contract with the dismantling company, because that would allow for vehicles that are currently sitting in these tow yards to be dismantled, which roughly as of last week were 100. So getting rid of those vehicles immediately would allow for about 100 spaces to open up to continue these operations and continue towing RVs and other vehicles in general. So I just wanted to add that note.
And I just real quick, I'm going to chime in here. We are at the 2-hour mark now. I actually had a meeting that was supposed to start at 7:30 across town, so I have to head back to the west side. I know we have just one, I think I see 4 more hands up, and I apologize that I have to drop off the meeting at this point. We are so close to the finish line, but I am very, very late for another meeting that I have to go to. So I'm going to ask Juan to step in and take over for me at this point, and just wrap up these final handful of questions. But real quick, before I go, I want to thank all of you for participating tonight, for continuing to care about these issues, for wanting to be educated and informed about it. And thank you for continuing to partner with my office. I know how frustrating all of this is. Believe me, we live it, we breathe it, we work on it every day. And so we understand the major concerns about this. And I just want to repeat before I drop off that I am taking this obligation extremely seriously. And I know how important this is to you. And I think that my team and I have demonstrated that we are in this to make the progress that we've committed to making. And you have my full commitment to do everything within my powers and my abilities as a council member to get these problems solved. It's going to take time. And like I said, I don't have that magic wand. I can't fix this overnight. I can't fix it by myself. I need your continued help and cooperation and support to do the things that we need to do to holistically address this problem in our council district and the entire city. So with that, I am going to say goodnight and drop off, and I will let Juan take over this last handful of questions, and I will see you all again very soon. So feel free to reach out if there's any other questions that we didn't get tonight, and we'll catch you guys in the next CD11 meeting. So thank you, everyone.
All right, so we're going to continue going through these last few questions. I will have Soledad go next. You will have 1 minute.
Hi, that's too bad the council member had to drop. My neighbors and we have been trying since April. We've been working with your office. We can't even get the signs up for the no OVO parking. And that's because where we live, which is right next to Bridge Housing, which within the 1,000 square foot SECZ zone, we have small streets, but these aren't single family homes. These are apartment complexes. So we can't even get behind the gates of some of these apartment complexes to gather the required signatures. So my question for the council member would be, what resources can you help us so that we can get the signatures to do this? And also, since we live so close to the bridge home within the 1,000 square foot, thing, could you just put up the signs within the SCCC zone?
Gabby, are you on to discuss that just a little bit more still for Soledad? And I know you covered it in terms of the posting and what's going on with some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Soledad, thank you for joining us tonight to hear the comprehensive report on this subject matter. Multiple, I should say, multiple, I'm sorry, my brain is right now. But what I meant to say was just, apartment buildings or just having large concentration and density is not new to the city of Los Angeles. In fact, many of the 40 locations that were submitted to us in the last 10 months, or I should say 6 months, do have that characteristics to their neighborhood. And I know that the past conversations that you and I have had is about exempting this specific location from a petition. A petition is very important for a number of matters, but mostly because it communicates community engagement as well as sign off. And so we just want to make sure that we hold a consistent structure for all of our constituents in the 11th. While I understand that some neighborhoods will be more difficult to obtain signatures, that is something we will absolutely support you with. So if you want to send me that email, we can definitely talk to partners like the Los Angeles Conservation Corps, who do a lot of community engagement and work throughout our neighborhoods, as well as I am in conversations with many neighbors who live around the ABH now, who communicate issues of concerns or quality of life to us directly via text. So the answer is yes, there's always a way to get things done. And as the councilwoman mentioned, our office commitment is there. And the second portion of the question, what was that one again? I think that was it.
I think you covered it.
Okay.
All right, so now we will move to JL. You could unmute. You will have 1 minute.
Hi guys. So first I want to thank everyone, and Juan, you and I have actually emailed individually. So I think my question is, one, I just want to say I'm very empathetic to folks who are down on their luck, people who have families, but that's not the current situation with the RVs that are parked on my street. My main question is, can we prioritize, or how can we prioritize dealing with these RVs where there are violent outbursts on a nightly occasion, where they are, having huge fights outside of my house, where they are running bike chop shops? Like, what can we do in those situations to where those are prioritized, like the most, chaotic and disruptive folks are prioritized to be moved out?
Hi, I'm sorry, Jay. I don't know the specific site you're talking about right now, but if we're in communication, then I'd say we're working through it, obviously. But part of what our process, when we, again, everything that we've discussed today, and even then as we get the influx of every site, safety is one of those that we work on to prioritize, as well as some of the ongoing neighborhood nuisance issues. So let's again, right now I just can't think of your site. Most of the other ones that came up, I kind of remember where we are. Maybe if I saw your name and not just JL, I can maybe pinpoint it a little better. But what we can do is schedule a meeting with me and Ashley so we can, as I mentioned earlier, dig deeper into your specific site to figure out where we are in that process, and try and get it queued up for resources. One of the things I do want to bring up in terms of that again will even set us back just a little more, is that as we go into the holiday breaks, the departments themselves don't do some of these more comprehensive operations, like during Thanksgiving week. We might only get just spot cleaning, as well as leading into Christmas and New Year's Eve. So that does change our timeline a little. And then what we do start experiencing around this time is weather delays. So on top of everything that we have to deal with, if it's raining, the operation is pretty much going to be canceled, and it gets reverted to a spot cleaning on that front. So I can't give you a specific timeline for any one location, but let's schedule a call to kind of go back over your specific site and figure out where we can put you in the queue and where we can allocate some of those resources.
Thanks, Juan. And for our final question of the night, we will have Catherine unmute, and then you will have 1 minute.
Hi, Juan. This is Catherine from PATH. I know we've been emailing back and forth with you and Sean in regards to a particular site. I know we had discussed dates for Care Plus, well, Care and Care Plus days in October, but I know I had been in contact with your office. We were given a date of November 1st. However, a cleanup didn't happen. I was wondering if that's something that we can follow up on to see when the actual cleanup will happen, because we've been coordinating joint outreach with LASA and everything, and we just want to make sure everyone is, we take care of everyone and encourage individuals to engage with community resources before any of this cleanup happens. So if you can provide some more insight, it doesn't have to be here and now. If you can just follow up with me separately, that would be greatly appreciated, but just so that we know.
Yeah, and Sean and I were specifically talking about this, and I know it was on our location, and sometimes, again, depending on where we are in the day, the departments will, the operations may take longer, and some of the locations sometimes do get missed through that. That's another kind of small issue that I didn't mention earlier, is that no matter sometimes how much we coordinate and all this time that goes into it, there are sometimes factors, whether it be delay or other emergencies, that may slow the day down and sometimes halt our operations that day, and we can't just rebook it the next day. But that specific site you're talking about, I'll work with Sean and Ashley to give you a date, because our LAX team is we keep you guys in the hopper, and I apologize. I know it was on there last time, but I do know that the location, due to time constraints, was missed the day we scheduled it. But we'll get back to you with the date.
And that concludes all of our questions.
Thank you, Jacob. And I just to reiterate what the councilwoman said, we want to thank everybody for joining, especially all of our departments for hanging in there, and for providing some feedback. Again, please, everyone, feel free to reach out to our office. We would like some feedback on some of this. If there were some questions that you'd like some further explanation on, again, we can follow up with you guys. And for a lot of our community members that are out there that want to discuss their specific sites, talk to me and Ashley, so the homelessness teams can schedule a meeting with you and your deputies to go out there and dive deeper into your specific locations, now that you kind of got an idea of what that process is. So with that, again, we want to thank everybody for hanging in there. I know this meeting ran much longer than even we anticipated with some of the questions, but we do hope it was helpful. And we look forward to our continued collaboration on all things homelessness and constituent services. So have a good rest of your day and a good night.